What's up, Gould Miners? Today, we welcome Roger King to the show. Roger is a real estate investor who currently owns 14 mobile home parks and has spent almost the last 3 decades of his life as a real estate investor. So needless to say, Roger has a plethora of experience to draw from, and he shares it all on this episode. At the beginning of the episode, we spent some time going over the earlier years of Roger's investing journey as a wholesaler, as well as doing lease options, and really spending some time going over the lessons that he learned leading into and up to the '08 crash. Later on in the episode, we talk about opportunity vehicles and how Roger successfully identified some softening in the flipping market in the mid-2010s and transitioned from flipping homes to mobile home park investing. We dig into the psychology of why he opted to do that, when he opted to do that, and why he might be thinking about getting out of mobile home park investing now in 2024. And then finally, throughout this episode, Roger does an incredible job of displaying and talking about the emotions involved in real estate investing and the psychology of a nearly 3 decades long experience, the lessons that he's learned. And he really just does a wonderful job of not just talking about the nuts and bolts of real estate investing, but also explaining to the audience the emotional and psychological components of his journey as well. It was a beautiful episode. I can't wait for you to listen and tune into this one. So without further ado, everyone, let's welcome to the show, Roger King. Roger, welcome to the Gould Mine.
Thanks, Danny. I'm so happy to be here.
Is that a beach back there, dude? Like, that is
totally
beautiful.
The Atlantic Ocean, 85 degrees.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That is absurd.
Hey man, it's taken me several decades to get to this point. So, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome though. I mean, was Puerto Rico like a conscious decision for the tax purposes, or was it just like more of a, because I don't know, like I feel like the taxes are going to happen regardless because of like, you know, the real estate being like, you know, where you're going to get taxed where the property is, right? So
yeah, I mean, you know, in as much as tax, you know, lowering your tax burden is a really important tool in being a successful investor over the long term. It's probably one of 3 reasons that I moved here. The first is I've got about 50 friends, kind of all from the Tony Robbins community, that have moved down here in the last 3 or 4 years. I've been in Palm Springs, California, and Las Vegas for 11 out of the last 20 years. And I just missed the water. And a buddy of mine said, hey, let's, you know, come down here and let's build a community of cool people. And I thought, yeah. And it has been cathartic. It has been, you know, energizing. And it's been just fun because like after we're done, I'm going to take Daisy, my dog, on a walk on the BEACH. If I said the word, she would start barking and freaking out because she loves it so much. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I didn't know how much I would love being here until I've been here for probably 8 months. And it's just been amazing.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, look, you have a rather fascinating background, you know, just kind of like going back in time and whatnot and learning more about your journey.
Yeah.
You were a rock drummer at one point.
So I started as a rock drummer, and then I got into the jazz drumming thing, which essentially made me start all over. Like I'd been playing drums from like 13 years old. Then I got to Berklee College of Music, and the drum teachers were like, hey man, you're not very good at the jazz thing. You know, I'm like, huh? Okay. So really, you know, going from playing Rush songs left-handed, you know, right-handed, left-handed, to going into playing ding, ding, a ding, ding, a ding, and trying to play it as quietly as possible was a whole different attitude. And that took years, a decade. It took me an entire decade to figure that out. So it's a really weird path, man. But I figure if a drummer can do what I've done, anybody can do what I've done. And I mean, I saw the guy that was 23 years old on your podcast, and I'm like, way to go, man. Way to go. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think you're selling yourself short there, Roger, because for people that don't know, Berklee College of Music is one of the most prestigious music schools out there. I mean, it's like right up there with like Juilliard, you know, like in terms of like the prestigiousness. So you definitely had talent, right? You just found a different, you know, and then you're taking that and you're bringing it over to the investing space. So like, what did that like, you know, when did that shift happen? When did that transition happen? Obviously, I don't think it's a surprise unless you're, you know, recording record labels, you know, with the, you know, like the top of the top of the top, or have your own, like, you know, successful band that you're not making a lot of money as a musician. I'm assuming that played into it.
Yeah, it played everything into it, you know, and what's interesting is you grow up and, you know, you're 12 years old and you think, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing ever. And I am getting some attention for it at 14 years old because I'm sort of pretty good now. And then you're in competition with your, you know, your friends, and you're like, I could play this song, but you could play, you know, and like this growing together. Then you realize, well, wait a minute. If I'm, you know, I got to college late. I got to Berklee at 22 years old, and some of my friends were like 3 or 4 years younger. And one guy in particular, I won't name his name. We were close back in school, and he'd already performed on the Tonight Show at 18 years old. You know, and I'm just like, it's virtually impossible to match that kind of talent. And I, you know, part of my personality was I would compare myself to some of these guys. And I took that on board as to thinking, wow, I'm just never going to get there. And part of that seeped into my psychology. And it took me many years to figure out, look, I cannot compare my internal stuff. My external stuff with somebody's internal stuff, or my internal stuff with their external stuff. That guy's, you know, was fighting his own battles just as I was fighting my own battles. And he just happened to have, you know, other skills and other gifts that developed more naturally and quickly for him. He had other mentors that I never had. And, you know, coming around to all of that has helped me understand that it doesn't matter if you have an aptitude for real estate, you can learn real estate. It doesn't matter if you have a father that was investing when you were in your teens, because it doesn't matter. There's plenty of mentors out there. There are plenty of coaches who can guide you down the right path. There are plenty of motivators out there and inspirations out there that you can find all of that stuff if you go searching for it. So it's available. The information is available. Putting it into practice, it's up to you.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Like, kind of what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say is that unlike the career path of music, where there is a certain level of talent / God-given natural ability that doesn't necessarily exist in the investing world or the real estate world, where, hey, like at a certain point, either you're doing the work and you're committing, or you're not going to reach the level of success. Like there's no amount of talent or aptitude, as you put it, that will catapult you, or even, you know, external factors like, you know, you said folks or like someone else being in it. So there's so many different, like the reasons why people will succeed in something outside of real estate investing, or like something where you need a lot of talent, or like, you know, ins, or like family connections, or just connections in general, doesn't always necessarily, those same rules don't apply to real estate investing. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think so. I think hunger and drive are, you know, far outweigh. And I would honestly say that hunger and drive in the music business are critical factors, but there is a tremendous amount of luck in getting on a top touring band, or being a part of a top touring, you know, musical act that you help form and you grow up into. And, you know, you look at the band Rush and you're like, wow, they were around for almost 50 years. And, you know, there was so much skill, but also so much luck. And it was, you know, I don't know that you need that much luck in real estate. If you're persistent, you can go find a deal. That's not the difficult thing. You can go make $250,000 in a year or 2 or 3 after starting real estate investing, if you're just persistent.
Yep.
You know, doing that in the music business is difficult, to say the least. You know, and I've got friends that I was at school with that are world-class players who still do major gigs with major artists, and they still play the, Sunday brunch gig for $150 in Pasadena. And because they've got to eat, they've got to feed their family. And, they just come back from, being on tour for 6 weeks with some major band, and okay, get back to work. So can you have success in real estate? Yeah. Is it easier than music? I think so. Sadly, but it's art. We're talking about art versus simply commerce, and art is a different, there's a different aesthetic value to pleasing art on the mass scale.
I can definitely, and by the way, I don't know, like, if you know my background, but I did a lot of theater growing up, musical theater, had Broadway aspirations. Yeah, Broadway aspirations, Broadway dreams. And, reality starts to set in after a while. And I was fairly successful locally. I was in I was doing very high-end productions, regional productions, was landing lead roles in those productions. But still, there came a time where I realized, like, hey, this actor's lifestyle, the bohemian lifestyle, it starts to wear on you, and that's when I transitioned into real estate myself. So it's interesting that you kind of had that same like aha moment where you're like, am I really committing to this lifestyle forever? Because as you mentioned, you have friends who to this day have reached a certain level of success, but financially not so much. Not so much. And we all have the dream, right? Oh, I'm going to get in a band and literally sell 20 million albums. And, it's going to be what we all imagine it is. And it is the furthest thing from that. Now, some people obviously have that dream. They get to live that dream. But the majority of us, and there's millions of us, we don't get to live that dream, which is okay. It's, it's part of where we are. And it's interesting that you went through the musical theater thing, because it's a very similar, look, I love my art. I want to perform. I love the energy of being creative. And yet $500 a week is not nearly enough to live how I want to live, or live in a clean enough apartment, So what else can I do to offset some of those challenges? I commend you for that. It's a tough, 100%. That's your part of your identity. And to come to that realization and say, okay, I can do something else as well as, right? That's a big step. It is. And it's a difficult one. So I'm wondering, internally, that dialogue, obviously it sounds like you worked through some of those like existential questions where it's like, hey, like what, cause that's a lot, it's a lot to kind of work through that. Yeah. At some point though, you made the decision. What was that first step like? And how did you first get into the investing side of things? Like, when did you first kind of make that leap, and what did that look like?
Well, the first thing I did was I left college in 1995, and, many people that were in Berkeley at the time weren't graduating. That wasn't really the ethos, if you will. I don't necessarily need my degree in order to go play the gig. And I realized, okay, the government's not going to give me any more money. I've tapped out of Pell Grants. So I'm going to go take my friend's cruise ship gig. And I went around and at the same time, we're talking late 1995, like December of 95. And I did that cruise ship gig for a couple of months and just hated it. And then my brother-in-law moved in. He'd gotten out of the Army. He had a newborn, and my dad had been investing for about 15 years at that point. We kind of all met in Orlando, and we started, I started driving for dollars. I started driving around the neighborhoods, listening to Ron LeGrand tapes and CDs, and like trying to figure all this out, and really going out there to say, okay, I'm going to do this. And at some point, I'm also going to play the drums. So I had my drums in my bedroom. I was still practicing, as much as I could, but also still going out and looking for properties. And it took about 6 months to find the first property. I put it under contract. I had this, flyer made up for the Real Estate Investor Club in Orlando. I met a contractor. He bought the contract. And in 3 weeks, I'd had, we'd made $25,000 on this contract. And I'm like, this is amazing. So, listening to Ron LeGrand, I'm getting Bandit signs. And, literally in 3 more weeks, we had 3 more deals from Bandit signs.
Oh, wow.
That say, we buy houses cash,
Right.
And I'd been like really just putting this stuff into my brain over and over. So when somebody called that phone number on the Bandit sign, they're like, hey, I have this house and it's worth this much, but I owe this much on it. And, and I would just go into, hey, maybe I can lease option it from you. Or, I can't give you full price, but I can give you this and I can guarantee to close in 3 weeks. And, just weighing out which is the best scenario for them. And, that catapulted success right away. Just that one deal and then into the Bandit signs and then fixing and flipping. And then, it takes off pretty quickly when you get a little momentum. So that's why I tell everybody, look, you can do this. Just have some perseverance. Just learn this stuff. There's some education, but you can do it.
Yep.
If I can do it, literally you can do it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that your start was really in like the wholesaling and flipping. Like, were you flipping those houses primarily, or were you? I'm assuming that you're saying you were paid an assignment fee, so I'm assuming that those were mostly wholesales.
Yeah, I mean the first one was I made $25,000 on the first one, and then the next few were all kind of a lease option. Each one. There was one couple, they had 2 properties. They were going on a mission. They're like, take this house and this other property we have in West Palm Beach, which is like 3 hours away. And so I would just go down to West Palm Beach on the weekend to go kind of flip that contract to somebody new. And then also we got another house from a different person that they knew. And so it just kind of snowballed. And then we started buying other properties that we could fix and flip at the same time. And so when there's 3 of you, you can start tackling a few different things. And I think that's when I decided one of our first fix and flips, we borrowed hard money, 18% and 6 points on $100,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, totally. And so I remember, I know, right? This is 1996. Maybe 1997. And just remembering driving over to this lender's house, and he's driving this really cool silver Porsche. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. And then walking in and just signing some documents and thinking, wow, he just made like, $40,000 for this year. I'm like, wow, that's cool. I just want to sign a couple of documents, make $40,000, right? Not knowing the full ramifications of, and risks of being a private lender. But it was just, it's just inspirational how you can maneuver throughout the real estate markets and the different sectors of investment strategies that you can go in. And when I moved to California, I got back into the mortgage game, still playing gigs at night and trying to juggle, making it in LA as a drummer, but also, hey, I still want to have a nice place to live. And and then the market crash happens and losing everything, losing all the equity in the company and some of my friends' money. And because my people that I was in business with were just not as I wouldn't say that they were as experienced as they should have been for raising the amount of capital that they were raising. So I really learned that the hard way. And I think the change really occurred for me is when that happened and saying, okay, look, I know what to do. I know how to do this. I just have to have a little bit of courage and move forward somehow. What would I do? Bandit signs. So in 2010, Yeah. In late 2009, 2010, I started putting up bandit signs. We buy houses cash in Palm Springs, and I got a bunch of tire kickers. And then one day in the summer, somebody called me and said, "Hey, I've got this house. Tell me a bit about what you do." We had a nice little chat. Yep. And in November of 2010, this lady calls me and she says, "Hi, Roger, you spoke with my husband over the summer and he just passed away. Can you please buy my house?" And so we went through the whole process. I said, "Look, I'm here to make money. And if you go to a real estate agent, you're going to make more money. You're going to make more money. I know, but my husband liked you. Okay. How quickly can you buy my house?" And I said, 30 days. And we figured it out. And I gave her on day 30, I gave her double what she was asking. And I started my new business. And it was one of those things where, okay, if you just start taking the action, you're going to get the results. You're just going to get the results. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And then from there, it's grown quite a bit.
So it sounds like, you had some traction kind of earlier on. You were still, obviously juggling like your passion for music, and then also doing wholesaling, and then flipping, and then getting into the mortgage game, and then the crash happens. And now you're getting back into the wholesaling / flipping business.
Yeah.
And you really start to hit your stride once you start investing in mobile home parks.
I'd say a little bit before that. I really started to hit my stride when I was providing capital for projects. I loaned money on one, and I basically met a professional borrower. I met two professional borrowers who just took the cash and didn't finish the project, and I was stuck with the project on two of them. And those lessons have become really hard. And so then I figured out, how can I take control of the property if these people don't, honor their side of their agreement? And so I figured out how to do that using what Florida has, a land trust statute. But how do you do it in California? And going through the whole thing with the title companies and figuring that out, and understanding, look, I'm going to own the property, and you can get the profit when you're done with the property, if there's profit. And that really kind of twisted. We were doing, from like 2013 through 2015, we were doing at least 7 or 8. We had about 15 houses at any given month that were in process somehow. So we had a nice little system there. Yeah, it was good for a minute. And then I realized in 2015, 16 that these projects were taking a bit longer, 3 months longer than we thought, 6 months longer than we thought, a year longer than we thought. And like, this is not sustainable because all the profits getting chewed up in interest. Then I started to think, okay, if I'm doing this now and then there's a correction, because everybody was saying, oh, the market's slowing down. We're due for a recession in 2016, 9 years after.
I remember that talk. Yep.
Right. And thinking, okay, if there's a recession, what's a better investment vehicle? Well, mobile home parks, because if the economy tanks, then more people move from C property down to D property. And if we can buy these parks in good locations, then we're going to do okay. We may not have a grand slam home run on any of them right away, but over time, these things will appreciate a lot. And so we started in 2018. We bought our first. We currently have 14. We got rid of our first one about a year ago. We sold it and bought a new one in November. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I understand the logic there, right? So you're basically picking an asset class that is recession proof, and you pick that at a time where things were still really good, right? So a lot of people don't have that kind of discipline, right? Because it's always hindsight's 2020.
Sure.
You probably were. Now I can understand some of these projects, the turnaround time was longer. Now, why was that, Roger? Was it you didn't have the infrastructure in place to handle the volume that you were doing at that point? Was it things were just taking longer to sell at that point?
Yeah, they were. They were taking longer to sell, the marketing time, and prices were fairly stagnant for a couple of years. The contractors that we were hiring were just like, they're starting their cycle of, I'm going to take this job, and I'm going to take that job, I'm going to take this job and this job. And then just everything drags out. And so they're starting to just like not get a 3-week project done for 9 or 10 weeks. And when you stack that into 17 other trades in a house, everything just takes forever. Yep. And that's when I made that decision. Look, I don't think that I know too much, but I know enough that says, look, there's some problems with this particular sector right now. The fix and flip model, it's running into some challenges. What else can I do? And then how long, how quickly can I get into that next sector? So I'm looking today at what's the next thing, because there's a lot of people in the mobile home space, a lot of people coming into the mobile home space. And it's like, okay, prices are going a little too high. Can I keep doing that, or should I pivot to something else?
Ever thought about hotels?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
There's lots of opportunity there. Well, we should talk about that later. But what I really want to dig into right now is this idea. And by the way, you just like what you just said right now. I'm like, this resonates a lot with me. A lot of what you're talking about like right now, Roger, is like, dude, I have gone through some of these, like some of the same things. For example, residential real estate. About a year and a half ago, I had a 35-person team. We're doing, almost nine figures worth of volume at that point. We were like going to eclipse it the next year. Yeah. And, really kind of hitting my stride on that. And at the same time, I noticed that like the commission lawsuit was going on at that point. So that was already kind of like percolating in the background, but more than that, were just like the margins were getting squeezed out of real estate, teams, margins getting squeezed. Number one. Number two, notice that there was like a consolidation on the lead side of things. And so like getting access to high quality clients was getting harder and harder to do. Yeah. And so there are just so many little things that didn't sit well with me at that time. And so I made a hard pivot at that point. And I had always wanted to get into hotels. But the reason that I did that, or one of the things that spoke to me, was there was a video. Do you watch any of Alex Hormozi's content?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So there was a video that he talked about Warren Buffett, where he kind of recounts this time when he was in college or like grad school. And there's another guy that he thought was way smarter than him, way more talented than him, and should be way wealthier than him. But after school, that guy, I believe he got into the steel business or something, which was a dying opportunity vehicle. Right. And he got into obviously what he got into. Right. And so now looking back, Warren Buffett says, hey, to me, it was just as much about picking the right opportunity vehicle as anything else. Yeah. And so what you're talking about right now is exactly that. You got into the mobile home sector before it was, as it was a rising opportunity vehicle, really use that to kind of like get yourself to that next level. Yeah. And you ditched the fix and flip, which by the way, I have a lot of friends right now who were flippers that are it just got completely creamed over the last couple of years. Yeah. And some of them went BK, so it's interesting that you saw it and you didn't not listen to your gut. And I think that's what a lot of people don't do. And so for anyone out there, opportunity vehicles, listening to your gut and knowing when to pivot, those are all things that are very integral to success. Yeah. Sounds like you were able to do that, Roger. Sounds like you were able to successfully navigate.
We'll see. All right. I hope so. Gosh, I don't want to start over again, but you said something, time will tell. Did I make the right choice? It seems like it. Right. But look, the guys with, what was the bank that failed at Silicon Bank, right? Smart guys, I'm sure they all have MBAs and they're all extremely bright. And they screwed it up. You know, were they greedy? Were they just short-sighted? Did they just not plan better or plan well enough and they could have planned better? All of it. Yeah, probably. But even the smart people, you know, you go and you're making $9, $10, $20 million a year, and then it all goes away because of a couple bad decisions you made 4 or 5 years ago or 6 months ago. And they didn't buy enough, you know, 6-month treasuries. They bought these 10-year treasuries, and that wiped them out when the bond prices went through the roof. Okay.
Sure.
You know, so all of that really comes into my brain. It doesn't matter how smart I think I am. I'm not as smart as I think I am ever. But you mentioned something about 20, you know, hindsight being 20/20. The interesting thing, and this is what I teach a lot of my students, is it doesn't have to be your hindsight. The information exists.
Yeah.
What happened in the 1987 tax law change has informed me to this day. And you may or may not know about the 1987 tax law change. And
educate me, Roger.
Well, so the Reagan administration, in infinite wisdom, and I don't know what the senators were, but what happened is they enacted a law that stipulated if you have a capital gain, you've got to pay the capital gain tax, but on everything. And so the way my father had set up his real estate at that time, he was selling property. He was buying properties and selling it to other people on land contracts. So he'd sell a property that he bought at $20,000. He'd sell it for $40,000, and he would never really, see the gain. It wouldn't happen for 5 years until that person cashed out the land contract. But the IRS said, "Hey, you just made $20,000. Pay our tax." He's like, "I don't have the $20,000, or I didn't get any of the $20,000. I got $1,000 down payment, and I'm seeing, $90 a month or whatever it was back in 1986.
Yeah.
They said, "It doesn't matter. You owe us 20% on that 20 grand, and on 40 properties, that becomes problematic when you're small potatoes." And my father filed bankruptcy back then, sadly, because the government just really wasn't taking into consideration all of the different factors of how people were doing it. And of course, I think about a year and a half or so later, they changed the law back so that everybody that had lost their money, filed bankruptcy, got kicked out of the game, was now could have stayed in if they could have fought that thing for a year and a half. But you live and you learn. So how did my father pivot back then? He found out that if you put a property in a trust and sell the beneficial interest to the trust, not the property, not on a land contract, nobody knows that there's any kind of gain about to happen, because you're talking about a piece of paper. You're talking about, I've made $20,000 on the beneficial interest when it sells, not anything to be reported at the IRS. So that would have been one way that he could have done it. So how does that influence everything I do today? Those are the questions that I think about. What happened in the past? Does it relate somehow? And if I can see how it relates, can I make a different choice? Can I make a different decision that saves me time, money, or effort? So that's how I think about that stuff from the past.
Well, it's interesting. You said it doesn't have to be your hindsight.
Yeah.
Right? Hindsight's 20/20. And it's so true, right? Because a lot of individuals, and I don't know, I used to think it was ego, and I think a large part of it is, right? Like people don't want to be, they want to do it on their own, or like they have like this like kind of like sense of, whatever it is, right? Like whatever the case might be, I'm too good for coaching, I'm too good for training, I'm too good for mentorship, or some version of that.
Yeah.
Also could be a financial situation too, where it's like, I don't have the money for this or that. Yeah. Although I would counter that with, I know that there are lots of people out there with a vast amount of experience who would give it away for free if you just asked.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you say that, because I'm a big proponent of mentorship. I'm a big proponent of latching on to finding someone that has walked that walk before, so that it doesn't have to, you're either going to pay for it with experience, or are you going to pay for it in terms of like finding a mentor, right? And then like paying them to learn from their experience. And so,
or a lawyer,
Yeah. Yep. 100%. 100%. So it's interesting. You pivoted into mobile home parks kind of like mid 2010s. So like 2015-ish, right? Is when you started.
2018 is when we bought our first park.
Okay. Gotcha. So 2018. Wow. So you've bought basically, what is that? So you basically bought like 2 to 3 per year for like the last 5 years or so. Yeah. Okay. And how have you found mobile home parks to support the buy-in? So it sounds like you've only exited one, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What are the typical life cycles of these? Like when you're underwriting or when you're analyzing these, how are you underwriting them? Are you underwriting them as like 20, 30 year holds, or what's the typical kind of like hold/exit strategy?
Well, so there's a couple of answers to that. One is, my partner and I, we like the idea of just holding on to them. And I've had to say, look, if it doesn't make sense, let's get out of it and get into something that does make sense. And so that was, I wouldn't say a conflict, just a difference of opinion between Brandon and I, my partner. And my thought was, look, if something is not working and we can't really marshal the resources to get it working, let's get it good enough, make sure we can make some money on it, and then 1031 that into another property that we know we can actually do better with. It's at a better location. It's less of a heavy lift. And what are those things we can do? And it's taken him a couple of years to get around to the idea of, you know what, let's get rid of this particular project. So that's good. Mm-hmm. So that's why we sold Golden West, our first property. And what's interesting is we also have to tell our investors, look, this is a 3 to 5 year hold. We're going to stay in this. Your cash has got to stay in it. And we don't ever want to get out of the property. So we're either going to stay in and give you all of your cash back or most of your cash back at some point, and then you're going to stay in it for the rest along with us. And that just means for the next 2 decades, you're going to see cash. And hopefully you want to stay in it. If not, we'll buy you out. So the investors have a different time horizon than us. I need to sort of be aware of what that is. I need to have that sort of in my brain when thinking about decisions that Brandon and I need to make over the 3 to 5 years that we originally bought the park and operating it. And, does this person want out? Does this person need out? And if so, can we ethically buy them out or offer it to the other investors who may want to stay in because they enjoy this particular project? We just have to kind of factor all that stuff in. I like the idea of buying these sort of beat up homes for a few years, a few more years, let's say, and then just what we can sell that would make sense to sell those and buy some parks that are better, that don't necessarily need any real heavy lift. We just bring in some management expertise and do our thing in that regard, not, fixing 20 homes, not repaving the roads, not cutting down 30 trees, all of that really heavy lifting stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I feel like you might have gone there if we kept going down that path, but I want to ask you point blank.
Yeah.
Do you have a target area for these parks? Is it all over the US? Like, what are some of the criteria that you've used to kind of like decide where and what types of, size and everything, size and scope of the deal?
Yeah. The first one that we bought was about 90 miles out of Oklahoma City, and it was just too far. So it's got to be within 45 minutes of an MSA of 80,000 or more, metropolitan statistical area. So that we know that whatever renters or potential buyers for the units, that we have those people covered when somebody else leaves. That we can fill units. We need to make sure we filled units because the one in Oklahoma, it was just too far. We weren't able to fill as many units as we'd hoped. we also bought this particular park that had a sewer lagoon. So everybody's wastewater went into this 4-acre lake, and that caused problems when it started to overflow the summer that it rained more than it ever had in 20 years. And we had to spend $80,000, I think it was, to pump water out with a septic truck.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the person says, well, you can just spray it on the other 4 acres next to your lot. It's already, land application's already approved. We're like, okay, learning curve. So no, none of that. We don't want power plants. We don't want any of that kind of stuff. And, we don't want parks that are fewer than 60 spaces anymore. We'd prefer to have things 80 spaces and more, higher. And we want not such heavy lifts. Medium lifts are okay, but not really heavy lifts. So I would say that those would be, primary things. We like the Eastern United States, not Florida, not Mississippi. We like Tennessee, Kentucky. We have Alabama, North Carolina, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. So we like, the Midwest and the Southeast, and keep things more localized so our team can just drive around. I would say that gets us close enough to where, when people send us the projects they have, we can go through them pretty quickly and say, this is good or that's not good. There's obviously some NOI requirements on day one.
Sure.
So that we can pay for various staff or portions of staff's salaries. Those are important factors.
So when you say we, right, that's you and your partner.
Yeah.
Right. Brandon. Yeah. So you and Brandon have found a formula that works for you in terms of like identifying the right parks, and then identifying the right areas. And now you've gotten it to a point where you've done enough parks now where you've learned some lessons and figured out like what to avoid.
Yeah.
Right.
We hope, what you think probably not everything, right? Probably not everything, but enough to know what makes it worth our time and effort to buy it, to even do our due diligence on it. Yeah.
Sure. What has been, like, in your mind, the most successful deal that you've done so far? And what was it about that deal, specifically with the mobile home parks? Like, we're kind of sticking with that same. So what was it about that deal that that made it so good?
I think it's our second project that we bought so far. And it's just, it's always run well. The tenant base was always there. We could always fill our spaces when they became available. It's just been the easiest park for us to run because of the amount of people in that town. The managers have been mostly really great. It just runs smoothly for various reasons. And then, you fast forward 6 years, it'll be 6 years next month or something that we closed on it. And it's so good that we still have 60 additional spaces that are already ready for us, waiting for us to start filling in these, new homes over there. So while it's already profitable, we can essentially not double, but add another 85 or 90% of a new park right next door on our land. So that's a fascinating thing about that particular park. We just love it. That is definitely one we will not be getting rid of.
So what you're telling me is that this park came with a bunch of additional land that hadn't been utilized yet or hadn't been built on yet?
Yeah, it's already plotted. The space is already approved. It's just waiting for people to, you got to pour pads, you got to build the roads, but it's ready and waiting for us to invest the capital and get that up and running.
That is, wow. So that sounds like it could be fairly lucrative then. That sounds it could be really, really lucrative. Really lucrative. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So coming back to this idea, right, of like opportunity vehicles, obviously you've had a lot of success with the mobile home parks, and now you're saying, hey, and I've observed it too, by the way, where like There are definitely a lot more people talking about mobile home parks now. That's definitely like a lot more, I would say, mainstream within the investing community. I still think the average Joe probably doesn't understand that, but that's okay because that's not what they do.
Yeah.
But in the investing world, definitely mobile home parks are kind of like now kind of hitting their stride in terms of like awareness. So what are some other opportunity vehicles that you believe, I know I'm asking you to give away your secrets, right, Roger? But what are some other opportunities right now that you're saying that you're like, hey, like I could see some opportunity there that maybe that's where mobile home parks were about a decade ago, right? That's where mobile home parks were a decade ago. Yeah. Where are you seeing that right now? Or where could you see the potential there?
Gosh, the idea of assisted living has always sort of, I've just always thought that that's a really great idea, business model. But, I've got so many different things, that are cooking at any time. I can't put that kettle on the stove as well. But it's something I see myself doing at some point because I don't see a slowdown of the baby boomers not needing some assisted living spaces for, 20 years? I'm 56 and I am a couple of years away from a boomer. So 59 years old? So 60 years old, man, they're going to need places to live for at least 25 years. And I just think that that's a great model. I think that's a great model. Are there going to be other people that hear this or have already been thinking about it that can act on it a little bit faster than me? Sure. Okay. Will it become mainstream? Well, just like mobile home parks are, multifamily has, we've seen institutional investors buying mobile home parks. We see that happening obviously with assisted living and self-storage. I think that it's going to become more pervasive in the general discourse of real estate investing throughout the average Joe, as you said. So I like that.
That's really interesting. And because you're not thinking about where's the money today. As investors, we always got to be thinking about where's the money going to be.
Yeah.
And you're right. In terms of assisted living, until they make nurse robots or robot nurses.
Yeah.
Where they could
a whole
continue
weird
to stay in their own house.
Nurses, robots.
Robot nurses or whatever, right? So until that exists, I could definitely see a need for that. And even maybe after that exists, you're staffing the place, but ultimately, assisted living, I feel like you're just kind of like thinking about it out loud. It's more than just like, it's more than just like a place to kind of like put people who are getting older and need more help, but it's also like a community, right?
Yeah.
For folks who are kind of like in that older, like the older phases of their life. So it's interesting that you say that because I haven't really thought about that, but there's actually quite a few hotels that I've run into recently that didn't pencil, we underwrote them that didn't pencil as hotel conversions, hotel to hotel. Yeah. But there were assisted living groups that were super interested in them. Super interested.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Last couple of questions for you here, Roger, because obviously I look at you, you're in great shape. Especially you just told me you're 56. I'm like, dude, you look great.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering, was health and staying healthy, staying fit and everything always a priority for you, as kind of during your life, or has that been something that's kind of been something later on in life? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. when I got to college, when I went to Berkeley, in Boston, the thing we would do, this is 1990. We would watch Star Trek and then go over across the street to Supreme's Pizza and have 3 or 4 slices of pepperoni and then go to Stevie's Ice Cream and have a pint of ice cream every single night. So I literally gained 40 pounds my first year that I was there.
Oh, wow.
And then
I
met a young lady at the time, and she's like, you should read Tony Robbins. And I'm like, who's Tony Robbins? I'll do anything. I read Unlimited Power, and I'm like, wow, this is an amazing different view on living life. And so at that point, I read that book. I started vegan diet in December of 1991. I think November 19th, 1991 was the last day I had a glass of milk still. And it was one of those things where it just catapulted everything for me. I lost that 40 pounds over the next 6 months. My mom thought I had anorexia, and it was just a transformational time. And it got to the point where I'd moved to Southern California in 2003, and I said, okay, my body's starting to feel something. I'm going to have a burger. And my friend said, you should try In-N-Out Burger. I'm like, what's In-N-Out Burger? I've seen it, and oh my gosh, it's like my body just like accepted it. Right. And I've had this process of trying this thing and trying that thing and living this way and living that way and identifying as a vegan and identifying as keto and just all these different things. And I feel like I've stressed out on some of that stuff over the years. I would say right now, I'm not in my best physical health. I've just relaxed a lot on that, even though I still take a ton of supplements. I don't work out like I used to, where I'm just like crushing, bench press and trying to do whatever I can to like get, big and bulky anymore. That's not where my headspace is right now. Will I ever get back there? Maybe. I doubt that my knees will let me run, 4 or 5 miles anymore. So I sprint a couple times a week. I want to play, various sports more frequently. But, there have been times where I've been extremely focused on like, let's never eat anything bad. And it worked for a long time. Yeah. And now I'm like, okay, let's also enjoy some of the fruits of the labor a bit.
Yeah, it makes sense. And one thing that's interesting, right, is that like, I feel this is just an observation when I kind of like observe people who are in like a growth phase of their career, their journey. And I would say that, I'm definitely in that growth phase. What I've observed is that a lot of people tend to deprioritize, right, health in those moments. And it sounds like you at least from a diet nutrition standpoint, and then also fitness standpoint, also were able to kind of like keep that a priority, right? Despite the challenges of like growing a business and having the stress of this and that and all those things. So what would you attribute that to? Obviously, it sounds like you've done a lot of like personal work with Tony Robbins and like done a lot of, I've gone to Unleash the Power one time and that was cool. But like, so it sounds like there's some things that you've done on a mental side of things to like kind of prepare yourself or like get through those times. But like, it's interesting because a lot of people tend to shy away from exercise and staying healthy while also like growing their business and growing their careers.
Yeah. And I think that that's probably the most important time to do it. Like if you're really focused on growing from 0 to infinity, whatever that number is, you have to be in peak condition, mentally, physically, spiritually. And I was blessed to have major inspiration at that point when I said, look, I'm going to do this and this and this, and I'm going to, get down to 175 pounds or 180 pounds, whatever it was. And I'm going to work out at least 5 times a week, and I'm going to lift, and I'm going to have a schedule, and I'm going to do all these things. And I think that helped me to grow. So but that's my, my version of how things were going. I would say that some people have that sort of like, I'm only going to focus on work, and I'm only going to focus on working out. And then I'm only going to focus on being a parent or, mate to somebody, a partner, or I'm only going to do this, or I'm only going to, and that's their path. I think the biggest thing for people to realize is that stress really is the killer. And if you're always stressed, if you don't have tools to help you de-stress, that's going to be where you find the most damage is done. And I still go through stressful moments. I still have projects that don't finish on time, that, contractors just, they I built a house in Palm Springs, California. It took him 13 extra months to finish the house after his original contract date.
Oh, wow.
And that's costing me money and money and money out every month. And it's just like, dude, you got to finish the project. Yeah. I need 3 weeks. Okay. And just coming back home and thinking, okay, I need to chill out. I need to go for a walk on the beach. I need to enjoy the sunset. I need to be in this moment, not that moment. And whatever tools you can find to get rid of that stress, because if you're really striving, there's a strong likelihood you're going to put yourself in stressful positions. You have to understand how to de-stress that. And sleep is one of the best ways to do it.
That's great, man. Roger, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think that there's a lot of similarities here. You clearly have our backgrounds, we share some common ground there. So this has been great.
Yeah. And thank you. It has.
It really has. No, this has been awesome. Yeah. I've really enjoyed, really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
In typical Gould Mine fashion, want you to leave the audience with one final gold nugget.
Okay. I say this as frequently to as many people as I can. There's a strong likelihood, and you and I spoke about this a few minutes ago. There's a strong likelihood that you're going to have to find partners in real estate investing, and that's a good thing. I think that there are millions of properties you can buy, but I think personally, you're going to find probably about 10 people that you can and want to do business with your entire career. 10 people that you see a situation or a property or an opportunity similarly and yet dissimilarly enough that it can actually work. Your ethical standards are on par with one another. Maybe you like to invest capital in this thing and your partner likes to not invest capital, but to spend it at this thing. And so how do you balance that stuff? And how long does it take you to really get your groove together? Write down your agreements. Write out the roles and responsibilities. Write out the timelines. Write out whatever you can that looks like a potential problem in the future. Get it down on paper. Solve it before you guys are mad at each other. And that's going to save you decades of problems. Literally decades. I bought a property 10 years ago with some guys that I thought were dear friends. We didn't do any of this stuff. And literally in December, we finally got a settlement agreement that got them out of the project, and we finally have a settlement. And it's a decade of my life. And literally it was one of the worst decisions that I made to not, put things in writing and to make sure that this guy was able to get his job, whatever his roles and responsibilities were, to get those things done each and every month or every week or every day, as he kept promising to do. So get your stuff in writing, make sure everybody agrees to it, and just really have that as the controlling document.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful insight. I mean, especially for anyone that's looking to do stuff on a more, even if they're a passive role, like active, passive, partnerships good partnerships are hard to find. I know that 100%.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, they really are. I mean, it's like finding a wife or a husband. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like it's really hard to find that right fit. And also, something that someone told me before, and kind of like, I'll ask whether or not you agree with this, is that different partners can be right for different seasons of your journey.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And so even though this partnership might be good now, it might be worthwhile now, it might not be worth it, or it might not make sense for you guys because your priorities and your paths kind of like deviate and go in different directions.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting point too. It's like, hey, vet the person, write down the roles and responsibilities for today. And then, in 5 years from now, I'll always be reevaluating.
Yeah.
Cause just like a partner, right? Just like a spouse, like a lot of times the people grow apart. And so that was something that someone told me one time, is like, hey, those partners, like they might be great for you right now, but always know that like they might not be the right fit for you 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Right.
Yeah.
So just having that, I'm assuming like you're nodding your head. You're like, yeah, I would agree with that.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would say do it more frequently, right? I would sort of always be testing the water, so to speak, to say, okay, does this, if we're about to buy a new mobile home park, how is the structure? How is the dynamic? Does it make sense for us to buy this next park? Is this somebody that I want to buy, start a new project with? We've got 3 to 5 years on this project together. Does Brandon see it still the same way I see it? I'm 16 years older than Brandon. I'm starting to see my life, my season very differently than he is. Right. I'm in more refinement mode. He's still in really strong build mode. I want to refine the portfolio. I want it to get really super tight. He's like, let's buy 5 more parks. I'm like, maybe let's refine these a little bit more. Right. So let's just keep checking in and let's say, okay, does this work? Does this work? How about this next thing? Does that work? And just like, with your, you're dating and you decide to get married, that doesn't mean you should stop dating. You should start, you should continue to woo your partner, right? Do those things that that partner loves so that you can still have that passion. And, if you're in business together, what are those things that your partner needs or wants or enjoys? Go do those things for that partner. This is relationships. This is, we're not here to just get my thing and you get your thing. This is let's give. And it just so happens we'll receive.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Roger, this has been awesome. And if you're watching this, or if you're listening to this podcast, I should say, and not watching this, I've been doing this podcast in the dark now for like the last 2 minutes. So I think it's very appropriate. As the light, I got to turn it on, right?
Yeah, turn it on.
Very appropriate. Yeah, as the lights come down, that we also conclude this episode.
Yeah.
So fitting that the lights have shut off now. But Roger, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for stopping by. You've been a wealth of information, and wish you the best of luck. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that we talk.
I hope not, man. I look forward to the next time, and thank you for everything. If I can help with anything, just reach out.
Sounds great. Awesome.